Welcome, everyone, to the PFF Fantasy Podcast. I am your host, John Macri, fantasy analyst here at PFF. And after going solo yesterday, we got the whole fam damly for a big old season preview episode, as I am joined by Nate the Great, Nathan Jahnke, and Kate the Great, Kate Magdziuk. Guys, we're a week away from the 2023 season kickoff. How are we feeling today?
I'm doing well, excited that we're only 1 week away. It's finally fantasy draft season. I think today is like the first of a series of days where every night I have a draft going on. So I'm excited to finally have some of these family drafts rather than all of the competitive ones that I've had. Now I don't have to like prep as much for those and just kind of wing it based on giving everyone else in my league a chance rather than just me dominating because I do this for a living and they don't.
But Nate, those ones are like your family drafts, the home leagues, not your work league, most people's work leagues, they can be almost like way harder to prepare for because there are people that haven't been keeping up with the news all off season. They put the biggest kilters in the ADP shakeups. Like there are no rules in family drafts in home leagues. So like this, we're gonna set people up for success, get them caught up from some of these off-season moves. But like those are always the hardest drafts for me because I can't prepare. I have no idea what Joe Schmo is going to shake up in my fantasy drafts because it's bedlam, it's madness. There are no it's crazy. So hopefully we get to prepare as much as possible, but again, like you just never know what you're going to get.
Yeah, that I found the same thing with like the family drafts. Like we have one that we do, and it's like an 8-team league too, so it's just like a super small one. But I always find like it just becomes complete chaos by like the second round already, and then you're just drafting like crazy. And I'm trying to like scoop up as much value as I can, and then everybody else just drafting whatever they want. We had like a kicker go in the 4th round one time just for jokes, and yeah, it was a complete disaster. And then it's just a matter of whose team is going to stay the healthiest for the entire year, because after that it's just it's a mess. So I'm with you. The family drafts could be pretty crazy at times. But yeah, so like you said, today we're going to be trying to get everybody ready for their drafts. We're going to be previewing the 2023 NFL season to get you all ready for those fantasy football drafts. If you've drafted already, there's still some prep that can be done and expectations to set as we head into week 1. Basically, we're going to go round by round to discuss like our favorite targets by round, our least favorite targets as well, discuss some of like our targets and avoids basically. We're going to use ADP according to the Fantasy Pros consensus ADP, which takes into account ADP from ESPN, Sleeper, NFL Fantasy, RT Sports. So some of these ADPs are quicker to update than others. Obviously, for whatever reason, JT is still a first-round pick according to NFL Fantasy, but that should catch up soon, and most people should be aware of that situation by now as well. So you'll know to avoid Jonathan Taylor there. But that's what we're looking to do today, kind of provide you all with one big episode to get you ready for 2023. So I'm very excited to get into this. But before we do, I do want to mention that this episode is brought to you by Fabric by Gerber Life. Fall is about the back to school and back to routine checklist, and the most important task on that list should be securing your family's financial future, starting with life insurance. Fabric by Gerber Life makes it quick, easy, and affordable to protect your family so you can get back to enjoying life. Fabric was designed by parents for parents to help you get a high-quality, surprisingly affordable term life insurance policy in less than 10 minutes. Fabric has flexible policies that fit your family and your budget, with quality policies like $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day. Get your personalized quote in just minutes and then apply when it's convenient for you. It's all online and on your schedule. You can go from start to covered in less than 10 minutes with no health exam required. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to protect their family. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/fantasy. That's meetfabric.com/fantasy. MEET fabric.com/fantasy. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company, not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions. All right, let's kick things off here. We're, like I said, we're going to go round by round. So we'll obviously start here in round one, starting at the top. The ADP has it as Justin Jefferson, Christian McCaffrey, Jamar Chase, Austin Eckler, Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, Cooper Kupp, Saquon Barkley, Bijan Robinson, Stephon Diggs, Nick Chubb, CeeDee Lamb. Kate, I'll start with you. The top four have been pretty consensus across all platforms. So let's avoid the obvious options here. Justin Jefferson, McCaffrey, Eckler, Jamar Chase. They're all off the board. Who are you looking to avoid and potential or target and avoid here in if you're next on the clock?
If I'm next on the clock, I'm gonna reach a little bit based on ADP. I'm gonna go with Nick Chubb, running back for the Cleveland Browns, who heading into his age 27 season, like the name of his game has been the efficiency in the run game. Like that has been his call to action. But this year, I do think that with the departure of Kareem Hunt and free agency, it averaged just under 12 touches per game over the last 4 seasons. You know, all signs point to Nick Chubb being more heavily involved as a receiver, which I think is going to take him over the top. He's my RB2 in fantasy rankings this season. You know, 5.2 yards per attempt, ranks second all time among running backs with 100 or more carries. You know, over the past 2 seasons, Nick Chubb leads all running backs in rushing yards, 91.2 PFF rushing grade, 27% missed forced tackle rate. Like this dude is unfailable on the ground. I just think this opportunity to get more involved as a receiver is going to be key. Not totally going back to Deshaun Watson and the potential with a deeper passing game. I think Chubb is going to be in for some targets, and I think that's going to yield his highest fantasy finish to date.
Nice. I like it. Yeah. We talked about Nick Chubb last episode, right? Where we were previewing the final week of the preseason. And look, I get it. I mean, within this range here, you can make a case for really anybody in that first round. So you don't have to necessarily follow the ADP. If you're a believer in Nick Chubb, you know you're not going to get him in the second round. I'm with you to take the swing. I think he can absolutely be a top 5, potentially RB1 overall this season. Nate, how about you? Do you have a preference for how you approach round 1 of your fantasy drafts?
At this point, it's just take the best available player. There was a time earlier this offseason where I was more heavy towards picking running backs early just because there was a clear top 10 and then everything after that was kind of messy. But you're starting to find a little bit more value in the 10 to 20 range. Someone like Joe Mixon, who we know is staying on the team. Basically, everything has stayed the same in Cincinnati this offseason, except maybe a little bit better offensive line. So Mixon was a very good fantasy running back last year and in the past couple of years. So I definitely expect Mixon to be very good. So I'm not getting him in round 1, but the fact that I can get him at a value later means that I'm a lot more okay picking a wide receiver in this range. Cooper Kupp, someone I think has a lot of value. I have him as my number 2 wide receiver right now. I think he'd be number 1 if we knew Matthew Stafford was going to be 100% and the same Matthew Stafford he was 2 years ago, and if Kupp was also 100%. The fact that he's number 2 is accounting for all of that risk of both of those players coming back from injury. But just looking at how consistently efficient he was, how consistent he was getting 100-yard games more so than basically what we've seen any other wide receiver do in recent history. It's just the injury that's taken that away. But the Rams have less competition for targets this year. They're probably going to be playing from behind, so having to pass the ball a lot. I think just the sheer amount of volume makes Kupp a pretty good value anywhere from that early parts of the first round to those middle parts of the first round.
I've got to say though, like the idea of drafting Cooper Kupp only becomes all the more appealing too after some of the reports we've heard coming out of I think this was Matthew Stafford's wife came on a podcast, said he had a little booklet printed out with everybody's picture on it because he just can't relate to his teammates. There's one guy he relates to very much so over and over again all season long, and it's Cooper Kupp. If he can't even figure out these guys' names, it's really hard to trust you know, your wide receivers and that they're going to be where they need to be when you're throwing the ball. But Cooper Kupp, I'm happy to report, does not have that problem with Matthew Stafford, which gets me all the more excited for his potential in 2023.
Yeah, I just hope that they're healthy, right? Like Matthew Stafford, obviously coming off that like spinal cord contusion or whatever it was last year. That sounds serious. I'm not a doctor. I have no idea, but it doesn't sound great, obviously. And it did hinder his, performance last season. Cooper Kupp, obviously, we know he's going to be the number one target far and away in that offense. It's hard to make a case against anybody here in the first round because they all have such high upside. Kupp, I've actually found, like, just looking back at like a lot of the drafts I've done and looking at exposure, Kupp has been the one for whatever reason I've been lower on. Like I just haven't ended up with as many shares of him. And I think part of that just has to do with a little bit, coming off the injury, dealing with the hamstring injury as well. So I just have like slightly more question marks with him, and at 30 years old as well. But honestly, I anybody here in the first round, I'm happy with. One of the guys that I like to look at personally is Bijan Robinson, still one of my preferred choices at running back outside of those top two. We're aware of the talent that's needed to get drafted inside the top 10 picks in the NFL draft, especially in this running back economy. You better be damn good, and I think he absolutely is. All the numbers coming out of college back up his generational running back moniker that we've heard so much of this offseason. And if you're the Falcons, you almost have to run the brakes off this kid in year one, even still, just to justify that draft capital. We know Atlanta was the most run heavy offense in the NFL last season, but they also have the best run blocking offensive line as well, which only helps kind of boost his potential for yards before contact and give him maybe more of a cushion to do some damage with the ball in his hands. So I think there's also a strong possibility he's heavily involved in the passing game as the team's lead receiving back as well. We know Desmond Ridder in his 4 starts last year targeted the running back on 23.5% of his pass attempts, which was the second most among quarterbacks, with at least 100 dropbacks last year. I know Tyler Algier could factor in. We've talked about that quite a bit as well, in the possibility that it's not maybe a true workhorse deployment, but it's a risk I'm willing to take here because I think the upside for Bijan Robinson, if he's getting 70+% of carries and getting that pass down work, is that of the overall RB1. And I'd want in on that because next year we could very well be drafting him as the 101 overall. So that would be one of the top targets for me in this round.
I thought for a second you were going to say after having a problem with Kupp's age at 30, you were going to go Travis Kelce, and like, there's another receiver that's getting picked before him that's 3 years older and about to turn 34 in I think 2 months now. But
yeah,
Kelce I think is fine in the middle of the first round despite his age, with the advantage that he has at tight end.
Yeah, that would have been a good gotcha moment for sure. But Travis Kelce, there's definitely risk there too, right? I just think, like, you look at that Kansas City offense and you're like, you just know Patrick Mahomes is just going to feed Travis Kelce like all game long. And it's him and him alone. So even at 33 years old, he didn't really show the signs of slowing down last year. So I still feel okay about Travis Kelce. But yeah, you're right. There's definitely risk there as he gets older, because one of these years he's going to fall off. We just don't know if it's going to be this year or not. All right, let's move to the second round, where ADP offers us Devontae Adams, AJ Brown, Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, Patrick Mahomes, Tony Pollard, Garrett Wilson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Josh Allen, Jalen Waddle, Jalen Hurts, and Jonathan Taylor. Nate, a lot of juicy options here in the second round. Based on where you went in the first round, do you have a preferred second round pick to kind of follow that up this year if you went running back or wide receiver first?
It depends a lot where you're picking in the round as well, since if you're at the start of the round, it's either running back or wide receiver. I've tended to like to get more balance. So if I'm picking a running back late round 1, then go with the wide receiver early round 2, or vice versa. If it's more the second half of the second round, I tend to go more quarterback with Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts. I have Hurts as my top quarterback this year. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that we've had so many other quarterbacks take steps back recently. We used to be able to pick late round quarterbacks and be pretty confident in the 10th or 11th or 12th best quarterback, but I don't think that's the case this year. With Tom Brady retiring, we saw Aaron Rodgers take a step back last year. We saw Matthew Stafford, Russell Wilson, Ryan Tannehill, all among the older quarterbacks who have also taken steps back recently. So I'm a lot more inclined to make sure that I'm secure at quarterback And we've just seen those three quarterbacks, Mahomes, Allen, and Hurts, play so much better than everyone else recently. And I don't think there's really much reason to expect any of those three to take a step back this year. I think the main thing would just be if any of them suffer an injury. But outside of that, we know they have the talent. And two of the three at least stand out in terms of their rushing. Mahomes at least is still top 10 among quarterbacks in rushing, even though he's not seeing anywhere near the production, but it's still enough to make his passing be so far ahead of everyone else, plus the rushing. So the combination of those three quarterbacks, I think, stand out and I think are worth the risk because there are running backs and wide receivers that I'm still comfortable taking later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And I don't mind, trying to grab one of these guys. But Kate, like this is the tier one quarterbacks. Basically, they kind of start to come off the board here. Do you prefer, are you like Nate trying to grab one of these quarterbacks in this second round, or do you have kind of targets elsewhere in round two?
I tend to target some more of the skill positions in round two. I enjoy, though I appreciate like the sentiment of enjoying that locked down quarterback position. I'm always going to be a late round quarterback girl. I don't know if it's ever going to change. Even with that security, I tend to avoid. I think there's a lot of value here in the second round in terms of top end production. Josh Jacobs very, very well could repeat as the rushing yard leader this year. Garrett Wilson, obviously a huge projected step forward. Amon-Ra St. Brown, especially with the absence of Jameson Williams for a 6-game suspension. If we're going to expect this offense to take another step forward, especially in terms of their production at home, there might not be a better asset in PPR leagues, especially to take than Amon-Ra St. Brown in the second round. I just think there's so many guys in this range that I like. And there are so many other quarterbacks that I also like later, like a Sam Howell, like a Justin Fields, even available a couple rounds down the line, that I'm sticking with the skill players here. The wide receivers, the running backs in particular, and waiting to see sort of what more value might fall to me at quarterback later on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've kind of been approaching it the exact same way, right? I haven't been going quarterback here, and like you, mostly I'm still kind of a believer in some of those options later in drafts, and like you mentioned, the exact same guys that we kind of like there. But there's still, I think, enough that I like at the position at quarterback, at least the guys that could finish top 10, that I'm okay passing on them because I love the running backs or wide receivers here. I think looking at the top of round two, like Nate said, Tony Pollard is the one for me. He's my RB4 this year. I think he has that RB1 potential as well, even into the middle of the second round. If he's available, I'm going to grab him there. If not, Josh Jacobs, also an option. I'm potentially looking at, if I got Bijan Robinson in that first round, now adding a Tony Pollard or a Josh Jacobs at that, which is a running back combo I'm pretty ecstatic about, and I'm okay to pass on wide receiver until that next round if I can get one of those two guys. Otherwise, like you said, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Garrett Wilson, Jalen Waddle are all my favorite kind of wide receiver targets here. I think they all have that overall wide receiver one potential. We actually talked about all those guys in our league winning wide receiver episode. So significant potential there, even if they need like a few more things to go right for them for that to happen. I just love betting on these young guys who maybe haven't shown us their full potential just yet as fantasy assets. And I think we could see that for all of them in 2023. So yeah, I haven't gone quarterback here. Pretty much the only time that I've got either Hurts, Allen, or Mahomes has been in super flex leagues where I'm drafting early on in the first round. But other than that, obviously Jonathan Taylor, I'm not drafting in the second round anymore. Derrick Henry, surprisingly, has been one that I've actually passed on a fair bit, usually because I like those wide receivers quite a bit, and I'm so high on Pollard and Jacobs. But yeah, that's kind of round two for me.
I actually wrote up Derrick Henry as one of my round one fades in an article this week, or sorry, round two fades. Went round by round and picked out one player that I'm avoiding. Derrick Henry fell, unfortunately on that list, being drafted on average at the 204 RB6. haven't seen a decline. And I'm not saying necessarily that we can project like a huge drop off in terms of Henry's efficiency. But the move for DeAndre Hopkins, a healthier Treylon Burks, Tajay Spears, who has looked pretty solid throughout the preseason. All of these factors in general, plus Henry's age, like I just worry about a slight decline in workload in comparison to some of those other assets in the same range. Tajay Spears, 90.2 PFF rushing grade in his final season in college. I think like you got to be excited about this prospect out of Tulane who just dominated in the rushing game. And I think, might end up projecting to be more than a change of pace back, which is kind of how I had him projected coming out of the draft based on what we've seen so far early on. And that has me avoiding Derrick Henry, especially like early second round. That's a tough, I at that point, if you tell me I either have to take Derrick Henry or go with my QB1 a la Nate, I'd actually prefer to secure down the quarterback position than to reach on Derrick Henry. If he fell into the third, great. It just feels like he's like the one guy that I can't stomach the ADP for in the second round this year.
Yeah, just to pile on there, the offensive line as well, like all 5 offensive linemen from his 2,000-yard season are all gone from the team. They lost a couple of those players this offseason. They've added players to replace them, but I don't think offensive line is going to be nearly as much of a strength as it was during Henry's peak season. So I think that's also a concern with Henry.
Yeah, we're playing the risky game, right? Because just like Travis Kelce, he's at that point now where at some point he's going to fall off, right? And we're going to see that production and efficiency dip, and it could very well be this year. And there's also the risk, there's been talks of Tennessee potentially trading him this off season. That could carry into the regular season as well. We'll see how their season kind of starts off, but there's a lot more risk with Derrick Henry here in the second round, and especially when you consider some of the other options available. That all those reasons and more are why I've been kind of passing on Derrick Henry in the second round this year. All right, round 3 is where I think we start to see some more of those kind of riskier picks emerge now with that, top 24 outside of Jonathan Taylor. Those guys were all pretty relatively safe, but now we're looking at, so we started off Chris Olave, Devontae Smith, Najee Harris, Mark Andrews, Travis Etienne, T. Higgins, Ramondre Stevenson, DK Metcalf, Joe Mixon, Jahmyr Gibbs, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson. Kate, let's start maybe with your avoided players first. Looking at this round 3 ADP, which players do you target the least from this group?
There's actually quite a few players that I'm like not fond of in this range. First of which on the list is going to be Travis Etienne, who, I love as a running back. I love as a talent, but there's a lot of concerns here for me that Etienne might be one of the biggest trap picks of the entire offseason here, especially in that third round ADP. Looking at his performance from last year, a sub 8% target rate, add in Calvin Ridley to the mix. I don't think that target share is going to get any more voluptuous here. I think we're probably looking at that being kind of his baseline role here. Add in Tank Bigsby. I'm not projecting Tank Bigsby to necessarily be a draftable asset, but I do think his presence here is going to be a problem in terms of upside, especially around the goal line. I think that this is going to be kind of a volatile season for Travis Etienne, even if he is one of the most talented running backs in the league. Also fading, Joe Burrow, not a huge fan of his ADP here, given the lack of like rushing upside. I'm kind of ice cold here on this third round. And I don't know if like maybe Nate has some nuggets here that is going to change my mind on a lot of these guys in the third round, but I'm like kind of out. No, thank you.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think I'm with you. There's a lot to kind of be concerned about with some of the players here. So Nate, how about you? How are you feeling about this third round? Are you finding you're avoiding a lot more of these players, or are there favorite targets of yours in this range?
Favorite targets, generally the wide receivers, I think are fine in this range. I don't think there are any great values out of wide receivers here, but I think they're all priced relatively where they should be. Chris Olave, Devontae Smith, T. Higgins, DK Metcalf, all of them. This feels like the right time to pick them. So perfectly happy to go with any of them if they fall to me in the right spot here. I'd add to the running backs that I'm probably avoiding. Najee Harris is also on that list for me. With Jaylen Warren, I think we'll see a significant amount of the touches and playing time this season. We saw him take over the passing down work last season, but even late last season, he started playing a little bit more on early downs, especially in December, and that's carried on throughout the preseason as well. It would be Harris for a couple plays, but then Jaylen Warren would come in immediately afterwards. Already starting to see more work on 1st and 10s on first drives of games, which happened last year and in the preseason this year. In a pregame for one of the games for Pittsburgh, they were saying the coaching staff has said they want this to be like a thunder and lightning situation where they know they've given Harris too many carries over the past couple of seasons, so they want to take back his workload some, so to keep him fresher and playing better. So that makes sense from a strategic perspective for Pittsburgh to do. So we could see this being a lot more 1A and 1B rather than Harris being the clear guy in Pittsburgh. So probably avoiding him there, especially when, like I was saying earlier, Joe Mixon is available in this round. Ramondre Stevenson, which I know they added Ezekiel Elliott, but I'm not all that concerned about it. I think Stevenson will still get a clear majority of carries, even more so than someone like ETN or Harris might get this season. So I'm probably happier with some of the later running backs in terms of ADP in this round than the earlier ones.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm kind of with you guys. I think, the both, I can see cases for both. Like I'm definitely avoiding ETN in this round. I just don't think, his overall potential, even if Tank Bigsby plays like a limited role, I just don't think that third round ADP is worth it here. And it also plays a part in why I want to target maybe running back in those first 2 rounds if I can, because I have enough concerns about these guys like ETN, even Najee Harris, even Ramondre Stevenson to an extent. With Stevenson, like you said, Nate, it's not as big of a concern, but in this range, I don't necessarily want them to be maybe my RB1 this year, though I'm not devastated if they are, because I feel even better about my wide receiver options, obviously, or getting like a Kelsey, for example. So for me, the main targets have been Olave and Higgins. There's a decent amount of rosters that I have right now where those guys are my wide receiver ones. And usually what that means is that I'm just going to keep attacking wide receiver over the next maybe 2 of the next 3 rounds or so. But I'm happy with getting either of those options as my starting points for the position. Again, just kind of betting on that high end younger talent who are still kind of in their prime for that safe production that they've previously established, but also the potential that they could be even better in 2023 is what I'm looking for here early in drafts. So yeah, I'm with you guys. I think the fades make sense, and for the most part, it's been wide receiver for me in this range. All right, let's turn our attention to round 4, where things do start to get a bit more interesting. We're looking at Calvin Ridley, Aaron Jones, Deebo Samuel, Breece Hall, Amari Cooper, Keenan Allen, Kenneth Walker, Justin Fields, Justin Herbert, TJ Hawkinson, Dameon Pierce, George Kittle. Nate, we have 4 wide receivers, 4 running backs, 2 tight ends, 2 quarterbacks, a nice kind of even mix of potential options here that we can take. So which path are you typically going in round 4?
I would say at least the one that I'm avoiding is running backs in this range. Guys that you talked about, Jones, Hall, Walker, all of them are in committees with at least one other running back. Yeah, they're the clear guy you want out of the backfield, out of the 2. But when there's other running backs, Pierce has snuck into this round, but there's other running backs in the next round or 2 where they're pretty clear 3-down back. So I'd much rather have someone on a 3-down back, even if the team's not quite as good, just because I know I can trust them in my lineup, where like Jones is on the older age for running backs right now, where AJ Dillon's still relatively young for running back. So if anything, I'd expect Jones to lose playing time and Dillon to gain playing time this season. And a big thing for Jones has been his touchdowns, which will be harder to get without Aaron Rodgers there. So all of these running backs I'm a little concerned about. So I'm definitely looking at any of the other directions. I think early in the round, the wide receivers are really strong. Ridley, Samuel, Keenan Allen, all 3 guys that I've written pretty extensively about of guys that I think could be top 5, top 10 wide receivers this season. All of them have been top 5 the last time they were healthy in the league. So they all have already shown they can do that. They just need things to continue to go right. And then end of the round tight end. I'm fairly happy to get a tight end here. I think it's a pretty big advantage to get one of the top 5 tight ends. Depending on the site you're looking at, Darren Waller might also be this end of round 4 range. So trying to get one of those guys is something that I would definitely do. And if it's not end of round 4, I would be trying to at the start of round 5.
Gotcha. Yeah. And Kate, assuming, say, maybe you haven't gone quarterback or tight end yet, would you be targeting any of these guys here, or do you continue to like the wide receiver and running back options instead?
The one tight end that I might be considering here, again, like we're gonna talk about him in round 5, with a round 5 ADP. But as Nate mentioned, sometimes crawling into the 4th round here is Darren Waller. I love Darren Waller, but if I'm going to pick one guy in the 4th round, I'm actually going to roll hard with Dameon Pierce, who I do think has top 12 potential in the 2023 season, even if he's not on maybe the most productive offense. I mean, Dameon Pierce, I think, is projected as a 3-down back in the limited preseason action we've seen so far. Again, what will that amount to? I don't know, but this is going to be a better offense, I think, in 2023 than we saw in 2022. Pierce was incredibly efficient, despite being one of the really only big threats offensively in this entire offense last season. Excels after contact, he's a walking bulldozer. And I think that's going to translate into the 2023 season, especially if we see some of that involvement, more of that involvement on 3rd down. We had Rex Burkhead depart in the offseason. I don't think Devin Singletary is going to be a huge threat to that work, especially just given the mix we've seen in the preseason and the snap disbursement we've seen with the starters. Dameon Pierce sat week 1, while we saw Devin Singletary get some playing time. Dameon Pierce is the guy that I'm targeting here, but if he's already off the board and I'm kind of like closing out that round 4, I'm going to reach on Darren Waller, because I think there's a very good chance he finishes as a top 3 tight end in 2023.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. We love Waller. I mean, we'll talk about him again, probably some more here as we get into round 5, but yeah, I'm with you. Dameon Pierce, right? He's seen his ADP rise quite a bit, right? You used to be able to kind of get him in that 5th round, sometimes even in the 6th round. But I think after that preseason usage has really kind of boosted him up the charts here. So for me, I'd like Pierce. I know I talked a lot about, maybe attacking wide receiver for a few rounds here, but I think this might be one of like these next 3 rounds where I do pivot away from that, but only if Justin Fields is available. He's been like the one guy in this range that I feel like has that tier 1 quarterback upside, overall QB1 upside even. So that Justin Fields is kind of the one player where I pivot away from like running back or wide receiver, whatever one I was typically looking to target. If Fields falls to me, then I'll take him. We've talked about tight end in this range before. I've typically avoided tight end here, but I think because I do think there's like a nice kind of tight end sweet spot coming up. So I'm okay risking it. Sometimes Waller will fall there, sometimes not. So I typically would avoid tight end in this 4th round and try to get them maybe in the 5th round if I really wanted one. But yeah, if I can't get Justin Fields, it's probably Keenan Allen being the guy for me, like you said, Nate. Getting him as my wide receiver 2 quite a bit, and depending on how things have gone earlier, sometimes even my wide receiver 3, which makes me very happy about my wide receiver core heading into the season if I could get Keenan Allen in that range. And yeah, so that's kind of where I was thinking about with this 4th round here.
Now, looking at the quarterbacks I'd mentioned, I'd definitely be much more willing to get Fields in this range than Herbert, just because of the rushing ability and how important rushing is to fantasy. Herbert just hasn't had that rushing production. So even though I expect him to bounce back this year compared to where he was last year and be among the better quarterbacks in terms of passing fantasy production, I don't think the rushing fantasy production would be enough for me to want Herbert in the 4th round, where Fields should have that rushing production. Just hopefully he can add some more passing production.
Yeah, for sure. That's the main thing, right? I think it was like 2,200 passing yards or whatever it was. But I do think like getting DJ Moore on that offense, getting an actual wide receiver one to help him, and add also yards after the catch and kind of boost those passing yard totals as well once he gets the ball to DJ Moore. And we've already seen that like a lot this preseason. And I know they're not playing against starters all the time, but it's just the potential there to be an even better passer this year for Justin Fields, I think, is a lock. And then that rushing upside is arguably the best in the entire league among quarterbacks, right? He's right up there with Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts in that range. So with a potentially better passing performance this year, we could see that QB1 upside for sure. All right, on to round 5. Another nice mix of options here. And potentially that tight end sweet spot that I talked about earlier, because we're looking at Miles Sanders, DJ Moore, but Darren Waller, DeAndre Hopkins, Terry McLaurin, Trevor Lawrence, Christian Watson, Alvin Kamara, Mike Williams, and then we get Kyle Pitts, J.K. Dobbins, and Dallas Goedert. Kate, can I interest you in a tight end here, or would you prefer a different position in round 5?
I think this is actually kind of an interesting range for the tight end position for me in round 5. Like I said, my preference is Darren Waller if I haven't already drafted him in round 4. Another really interesting option, I think, though, is Dallas Goedert, who, I think most people really seem to like. I also really like him, but I think there's some concerns, despite the efficiency that we've seen from him season over season, that there might just not be enough, chops to go around, given the presence of AJ Brown, given the presence of, Devonta Smith. Like, what are we actually going to see from him? But over the past 2 seasons, Dallas Goedert ranks top 4 among tight ends in PFF receiving grade. Has just been, I think, such a key fixture in that offense. In terms of being just a viable target across the middle. Over the past 2 seasons, it ranks 4th in receiving yards, a nice threat after the catch. I think he just offers a lot to like. But generally speaking, like I said, I'm probably going to go with Darren Waller here. There's a lot of players similarly to round 3 that have me a little hesitant. Terry McLaurin with the turf toe injury has me a little shaky. Alvin Kamara with the 3-game suspension. J.K. Dobbins with whatever mess is going on. Like, I can't think of any running back we're still investing this heavily in that has proven less to us in year over year. Like, we just keep going back to that efficiency and yards per carry. But show me something beyond that, because he's not a fixture in the receiving game. I don't think any of the receivers they've added into the mix this year help. Lamar Jackson, not overly inclined to target his running backs. Like, what are we doing with J.K. Dobbins? I feel like I'm like the poo-poo of the 3rd and 5th rounds, because if this is a redraft league where I can trade picks and Darren Waller's off the board here, I'd probably prefer to trade back and get some of the value later on in the draft. Because I think there's some interesting names in the next couple of rounds to come.
Yeah, definitely some interesting names in these later rounds. And yeah, you're really kind of hoping, like you said, that maybe some value falls to you from those earlier rounds that comes into this 5th round here, Darren Waller being one of them. But it's definitely not impossible, because, yeah, running back in this round, I've basically been completely avoiding. But how about you, Nate? Let's assume you still need a tight end. Is round 5 maybe the latest you'll wait to target the position, or are you willing to kick the can down the road a little bit more?
Yeah, I'm definitely trying to do everything I can to get at least one of the top 7 tight ends this season. We've just consistently seen year after year, it's the same couple guys that are consistently the best in terms of fantasy points per game. We always see some players get injured, and that impacts overall standings in terms of tight ends. But we've seen the same guys. Darren Waller has consistently been there when he's healthy. Dallas Goedert has consistently been there when he's healthy. With someone like Goddard, I think he's probably the safest player that you can pick in this round. He's consistently doing well in terms of receptions and receiving yards, despite even last year having all of that talent at wide receiver. My big concern for him is touchdowns. They just haven't always been there, and having Jalen Hurts' ability to score when they're close to the goal line, plus the investment they've made at running back, I don't see Goddard scoring a lot of those short touchdowns. I think he can definitely make some big plays for touchdowns. It's just harder for me to see him being a top 2 or 3 tight end this season, where I think Waller definitely has the chance to be there. We were talking at the start of the show in terms of like home leagues versus more competitive leagues. I think if you're in a very competitive league where everyone knows what they're doing, it's going to be difficult to get Waller in round 5. But like the draft that I have later tonight, I can be fairly confident that Waller has a decent chance of being on my team, since I don't see anyone else potentially picking him up because they probably forgot about him over these past 2 years when he's been out with injury. So Waller, I'm definitely happy to get. And then Kyle Pitts is just the biggest gamble you can make at tight end, just since he has the talent to be that good. It's just if Atlanta's going to be passing the ball enough, if he's going to see enough playing time. For me, it's always worth reminding myself that he's still only 22 years old. So even though he's had the 2 years in the league already, he's still younger than plenty of rookie tight ends. So regardless of what we've seen these last 2 years, he still has plenty of time to grow and develop into an elite tight end. Whether or not that happens this year or not is yet to be seen, but I definitely would be more intrigued taking Pitts here than waiting a round or two and getting one of the tight ends who's more in the middle of their career. We know exactly what they can do. They're not going to be a top 5 tight end. We know that. It's just they'll be good enough that you can put them in your starting lineup over someone off the waiver wire, but not much else.
Yeah, I think for me, the same kind of thing, right? Depending on my build, if I have like a fairly even split of running back, wide receiver to this point, then this is definitely my favorite spot to target the tight end position. I'm a big Dallas Goedert fan. I do have Darren Waller ranked ahead of him, so I'll grab Waller first. I know, he maybe carries a bit more of that injury risk, but really, I just think this is a huge bounce back year for him in New York. You don't have, any doubt that as long as he's healthy, he'll be Daniel Jones's favorite target in this offense. So, and it's basically he's kind of shown that so far, at least in the preseason on small sample size. So he's the top target for me, followed by Goddard and then Kyle Pitts in that order. Like you said, still a believer in Pitts' talent and overall upside, but more concerned with maybe what his potential role in this offense is than I am with the other two. And yeah, Dallas Goedert, the touchdown thing, I do think like to a point, like he's kind of been unlucky because he's so good with the ball in his hands, and he's one of the best tight ends in the league after the catch, but he's ended up like within the 5-yard line and not in the end zone so many occasions that he just hasn't been able to punch it in. I feel like we're just needing him to kind of get over that cliff a little bit and get, the extra yard or two to be able to add to the touchdown total, which it could happen. But like you guys have been saying, there's a little bit more mouths to feed in that offense too, right? With AJ Brown and Devontae Smith as well. And then you had DeAndre Swift to the mix. Jalen Hurts getting those sneak touchdowns. So I'm with you guys. I think Waller is the top one to target here as well. I also love DJ Moore, Christian Watson, Mike Williams in this range to an extent. Terry McLaurin I love as well. But yeah, the turf toe thing, it is scary. I've become less excited about him now as there's kind of that uncertainty around him. So the only thing is I just can't bring myself to draft any of these running backs, especially considering the ones that are still on the board in round 6 and beyond, basically.
Yeah, like I'm fine with Miles Sanders. It's a little high for me to like Miles Sanders. I think he'll do well in Carolina. I think he'll have a big role. The start of round 5 is probably too early for me to like him, though. And then the wide receivers, like you said, happy to get more. Happy to get Mike Williams. I think he should rebound in terms of his touchdown total, and he's consistently been playing well and getting enough targets. It's just the touchdowns were down last year compared to in the past, and I think that all regressed. I had a player profile on him well over a month ago at this point, explaining why in detail I think that, but not as high as Terry McLaurin. I'm too high on Jahan Dotson to be high on McLaurin, and then Hopkins as well. It's like he's near the end of his career and he'll see some targets, but I don't see him being a top 15 tight end. I don't know how he's going to get there. So I'd much rather get players in this range that I can see a scenario where they'd be a top 15 player at their position, and I don't see it for Hopkins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's fair. And yeah, I'm with you. I like Miles Sanders as well, but yeah, like you said, it's more the ADP, right? He feels like he fits more in that kind of round 6 range with some of those other guys, as opposed to the top of the 5th round there. So quickly, let's take one last ad break before we get into the rest of this here. And this is from our friends at DraftKings. College football fans, are you ready for week one? DraftKings Sportsbook is hooking you up with a can't miss offer to start the season strong. This week, new customers can bet just $5 on college football and score $200 in bonus bets instantly. Anything can happen in college football. Your team could go from unranked to dynasty mode in just a couple of years. Changes come fast. The only thing that's a lock is the great offers from DraftKings Sportsbook. Life's more fun when you're in on the action. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code PFF. New customers can score $200 in bonus bets instantly when they bet just $5 on college football. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code PFF. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort. 21 plus age varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. See dkng.co/football for eligibility terms and responsible gaming resources. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. Eligibility and deposit restrictions apply. All right. On to round 6. I mentioned that there have typically been like a plethora of starting and startable running backs still available to target if we'd like. And we really begin to see them going here in the 6th round. So starting with Cam Akers, Alexander Mattison, James Conner, Rachaad White, Dalvin Cook, Jerry Jeudy, Chris Godwin, Drake London, Tyler Lockett, Isaiah Pacheco, Javonte Williams, and Brandon Ayuk. Nate, we've talked about this range quite a bit in previous draft strategy episodes. So who are some of your favorite targets in this range?
The running backs at the start, especially Alexander Mattison, I feel like sometimes I've seen him go even earlier, but hopefully all that hype for Ty Chandler has knocked Mattison back down a little bit. But I think Mattison just standing out because he has the 3-down role and how good the Minnesota offense is compared to some of the offenses that we're talking about here. So I think he has everything that you kind of want in a running back, just not the long history of success. He's only had it in a couple of games here and there, but I think that's enough of a sample size for me to be comfortable picking him in this range and starting him most weeks. But guys like Akers and Conner and White, all players that I think will have significant roles in their offenses. It's just how good are those offenses going to be? But I think with fantasy football, you care more about volume than efficiency a lot of the time, and I think they will get the volume. I think it helps in all 3 of the cases that the quarterback situation isn't the greatest. So if it was a team with like a rookie that they were trying to get a lot of new experience, or a quarterback that they were maybe happier with in a bad offense, I might be a little bit more concerned. But I think all 3 of these offenses are going to need to rely on Akers and Conner and White significantly this season. So comfortable drafting players at other positions earlier, waiting to get a running back here, and fairly consistently getting a running back here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Kate, how about you? I know for me, I want all these guys at this price, but I likely can only have one, at best 2. So how about you? Who are your favorite targets in round 6?
Favorite targets, have to agree here with Nate in terms of Alexander Madison's upside. I mean, we have a limited sample size of what Alexander Mattison has done without Dalvin Cook. 6 games, average over 20 PPR points per game. Saw more than 15 touches in 5 of those 6 opportunities starting without Dalvin Cook in the lineup. The team seems to have doubled down on Alexander Mattison, so he's probably my first bet. I don't think there's any significant competition, working behind him. So really like the potential there. He's I think just generally a solid value here in the 6th round, especially, just he's going to be, I think if healthy, he's going to rank top 15 in the league in terms of touch volume. And that not very often you get to draft that here in the 6th round. Additional shout out here to James Conner, who I think is a solid bet. Despite the fact that you're not going to have Kyler Murray here, at least to start the season, I can't imagine a world, if this season goes off the rails early, that they take the risk to get Kyler Murray back in the lineup. I could be wrong here, but surprisingly, in games without Kyler Murray last year, actually saw an uptick in production from James Conner, average 18.8 fantasy points per game in those games without Kyler Murray last year due to injury with the torn ACL. Saw somewhat of a slight uptick in terms of receiving production, 4.8 targets per game. Just a lot to like, I think, here with James Conner. This team's gonna need to utilize him both on the ground and as a receiver. I feel like he's kind of one of those locks for top 24 finish any given week as long as he's healthy.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. This is the running back round for me. I mean, I have those three top guys there: Madison, Akers, Cook, all ranked right next to each other. So if these are the options available, I'm drafting them that way. Whoever I like the more on that day, because I've noticed these guys kind of be interchangeable for me. It just depends on the day, basically. But Madison has been the top one throughout, just playing on the better offense as well. So he gets the slight edge there. But yeah, I also like Rachaad White. I wrote him up as a breakout candidate this year, along with Madison and Akers. So he's definitely in play. But Javonte Williams, too, he kind of stands out as the one who I think, if things break right for him, could be potentially the best of the bunch. Just as far as overall talent, I don't think there's much question that maybe he's the best overall running back in this range, but there's definitely question marks surrounding like his health still, what the usage might be with Samaje Perine in the mix, and what this Denver offense will look like. So he needs more to kind of go his way, but if it does, I think he's a potential winning lottery ticket here in the 6th round as well. So Javonte Williams does become interesting to me if these guys are already off the board. I'm picking near the end of the 6th round, but also happy, with some of these wide receivers too. If I'm already running back heavy, Jerry Jeudy, although Judy's dealing with the injury, but Chris Godwin, Brandon Ayuk are couple favorites of mine as well. But it's just a running back round. I just really like these guys.
The RB dead zone, I feel like, is no longer dead.
It's like a sweet spot now.
This is kind of a sweet spot. I think there's so much value to be had right here. Forget the 5th round. I'm 6+ round girl now. Like I'm a fan. I'm fangirling the 6th round, if you will. Like, this is great value.
Nice. Yeah. It's a good way to kind of turn it around, right? I think that, like that 4th and 5th round, maybe that could be the dead zone a little bit more. But once we get into this 6th round, I just love these guys. There's not a draft I'm coming out of without one of these guys on my roster, basically. All right, let's go to round 7. So this is where we see our first defense and special teams come off the board. So I would not recommend this, but to each their own here, I guess. Otherwise, we're looking at DeAndre Swift, James Cook, Mike Evans, Christian Kirk, Deshaun Watson, Deontay Johnson, Evan Ingram, Michael Pittman Jr. This is the San Francisco 49ers defense and special teams. George Pickens, David Njoku, and David Montgomery. So Kate, we're coming out of the 6th round. We'll assume we grabbed a running back. What are you looking at here in round 7? Anybody pop out to you?
I have to agree with you, avoiding the defense special teams here, but the pick here for me in this round, I feel like every single time over and over and over again, going to be Deontay Johnson. And not just because I'm a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, but there's not, I can't find much better value than Deontay Johnson, who's had 140 plus targets in each of the last 3 seasons. Finishes the wide receiver 28 last season, despite not having scored a single receiving touchdown. Like, that value to me is absolutely insane, that you can be drafting him, on average as like wide receiver 36, when we know there's going to be some regression in terms of touchdown scoring, both for, I think, Johnson, but also for the Steelers offense in general. I'm trying not to be too much of a homer here, but just even based on volume, even if you're not a fan of Deontay Johnson as a route runner, which you got to be crazy if you're not, if you're not a believer in I just think the volume is too good to pass up in terms of his value in round 7 of fantasy drafts. It's insane to me.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, you look at that offense as a whole, right? Like, Kenny Pickett too. He's been on fire. I know it was the preseason or whatever. He was our highest graded quarterback, but that even continued from last season as well. The back half of the year, he was the number 1 graded passing quarterback. I know it didn't translate to fantasy points or touchdowns or anything, but it's a positive sign, at least going forward, that he's a capable NFL quarterback that can get the ball to these guys. And look, Deontay Johnson, like you said, 141 targets last year. He's not going 140 targets again without scoring a touchdown. It's just not happening. So yeah, give me those 141 targets, which was sixth most among all wide receivers last year, in the 7th round all day. That is absolutely a bargain there. The other guy that stands out to me is James Cook. He's actually kind of one that I'm willing to maybe include in that round 6 range as well with those running backs. So if I can get him here in the 7th round, I'm also into James Cook in this range. I know there's maybe a little bit more risk that the Bills don't run the ball as often in that for him with that offense, but I like the upside there if he becomes that kind of clear lead back in Buffalo, which it does seem like he will be. So those are the 2 top options for me. Absolutely. It's Deontay Johnson, but I do still like James Cook a fair bit heading into this season. But how about you, Nate? What are you looking at here in round 7?
Yeah, I was thinking the exact same thing with Cook. I'm probably grouping him with those guys we were talking about in round 6. Like, the big concern for me is his ability to score touchdowns near the goal line if they put in some of the other backs. But some of the backs we were just talking about, I'm worried about their offenses being able to get to the goal line in the first place. So I think I'm fine grouping Cook in with those players. And I think generally wide receivers in this round, I feel like a lot of people like drafting those young wide receivers who have a chance to break out. And a lot of these wide receivers, we more or less know who they are and what they're capable of doing. But I'm perfectly fine having one of those players on my roster, since I know I'll be drafting some of those younger wide receivers in other rounds. So I know I can put Johnson in my starting lineup. I know I can put someone like Evans or Kirk or Pittman. They're going to be pretty consistently decent enough players that you can put in your starting lineup. But then you're drafting all of these wide receivers later in hopes that they're breaking out. So you're hoping that you're drafting someone that maybe replaces one of these players at one point of time. But I definitely want to have one of those players on my team so that I know each and every week I'm scoring enough fantasy points to be competitive with my opponent.
Yeah, even George Pickens, right? Like, I think George Pickens has a chance to be a better wide receiver this year as well for fantasy. I'm with you, Kate. Look, this Pittsburgh offense, I think absolutely the entire offense as a whole basically has a chance to bounce back this year. And I know they finished I think dead last in touchdown rate last year, but they were also 15th in positive EPA per play rate. So there's bound to be some positive regression there for this offense, specifically for guys like Deontay Johnson, potentially George Pickens and Kenny Pickett as well. So there's a decent amount to like here in round 7. So I don't mind the options at all. I'm not really kind of fading anybody or hating anybody other than the defense and special teams, obviously. All right, Nate and Kate, it's time for round 8. When it comes to our picks so far, we got to be feeling great, but now it's time to see who is on our ADP plate. We got Dak Prescott, Marquise Brown, Jahan Dotson, Tua Tagovailoa, AJ Dillon, Jordan Addison, Pat Freiermuth, Brandon Cooks, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Justin Tucker, Khalil Herbert, and Aaron Rodgers. So Nate, are you taking a kicker in round 8 by any chance?
No, I'm not. I'm going to go straight to the wide receivers that we have in this round: Jahan Dotson, Jordan Addison. My clear 2 favorites on this list. I think Jahan Dotson just constantly scoring when he's on the field. And then late last season, once he was healthy again, started seeing around 70 yards a game, which is pretty decent considering the quarterbacks that were throwing to him. I think it'll just continue to grow this season. I think he's already gained plenty of good chemistry with his quarterback now and Sam Howell. I know Terry McLaurin has his toe injury, so that could impact things at least a little bit early in the season. But I think Dotson is just a very good young player that's just in an offense that people aren't all that excited about. So I think that's probably the biggest reason why his ADP is this low. And then Jordan Addison in Minnesota played very well in the preseason in the one half of football that he played. First round pick wide receivers have tended to do fairly well in recent seasons in terms of fantasy success. Not all of them end up hitting, but I think Addison should see the playing time immediately. And 3 wide receiver sets should be able to overtake KJ Osborne easily enough at some point of time. So I think there's enough volume in this Minnesota offense. I know there's other good players in the offense too, for sure, but I think Addison being able to be someone that gets the least amount of coverage from defenses will also help him. So I think those are the 2 that I think could have very big seasons.
Yeah, I'm totally with you there. Those are the guys that stand out for me as well. I think they could be potentially like elite wide receiver twos on their own team. I liked Jackson Smith and Jigba more for dynasty, less so for redraft. So I haven't been drafting him a lot here, but Dotson and uh, Addison have been the two that I've been targeting the most here. But how about you, Kate? Anybody that jumps off the screen here for round 8 for you?
It's Jahan Dotson, to be a total broken record for for the listeners here. I just think there's so much to like about his potential heading into year 2. I loved what we saw from this Commanders offense in general. Sam Howell looked, I think, confident as a passer, very competent, seemed very in command, of the field.
Mhm.
I'm definitely in, especially with the hot end he had to that season, but also considering that injury to Terry McLaurin, which like even, that week 1 is kind of in question at this point, but given the fact that this is a toe injury, Terry McLaurin is a wide receiver, like you really bank on some of that explosion, right? And getting off the line quickly. And, a big part of that is the toes and the foot, like that is kind of a big part of what is going to be key to a wide receiver like Terry McLaurin's game. I think even if he's on the field, that's going to be good for Jahan Dotson, that's going to be good for Sam Howell, but I do worry that in terms of his own fantasy production, not going to be great. So I think this could be a really hot start to the season for Jahan Dotson especially.
Yeah, I'm into it. And look, Jahan Dotson never had a bad week 1 in the NFL. So we're banking on him again to do the same. But yeah, I think just to kind of point out maybe some of the other options in this range here. I think Dak Prescott, Tua Tagovailoa, I think there's still strong options to potentially be your team's QB1 if you still needed it at this point. Even Aaron Rodgers, really, I'm okay with any of those guys. Because it means I've added maybe potentially more with earlier picks at other positions. So I think Dak and Tua should push for maybe top 10, maybe even top 8 finishes this season. Rodgers, I think, will be rejuvenated in New York, kind of remotivated to bring that team to a Super Bowl. So I would not be shocked to see him return to that kind of near MVP form here in 2023. But yeah, the main targets here are always going to be Dotson and Addison for me. Those are the two. I think, Khalil Herbert is interesting here, but if Dotson and Addison are still on the board, I'd rather hope that Herbert falls to round 9. And if not, I'm fine with it and just grabbing Dotson or Addison. All right, so let's go to round 9. More defenses and kickers coming off the board in round 9, which just means more value for the rest of us, as these auto drafters are more likely drawing the short straw here. But hey, better them than me. So we got Jamal Williams, Cortland Sutton, the Eagles defense and special teams, Michael Thomas, Odell Beckham, the Bills defense and special teams, Gabe Davis, Brian Robinson Jr., Juju Smith-Schuster, Kirk Cousins, Antonio Gibson, and Daniel Carlson. All right, Kate, we got round 9 here, a little bit of a mix here. We're definitely going to start finding some value as teams are drafting defenses and kickers. So anybody stand out to you as a personal favorite target in round 9?
I'm kind of feeling Antonio Gibson, not to double up on all of the Commanders in back-to-back rounds, but I, in addition to liking what we've seen from Jahan Dotson, I think we should be pretty excited about Antonio Gibson in terms of his production as a receiver. Like coming out of college, he was a converted wide receiver, and now that we're finally starting to see him utilized as a receiver, now's the time we all hop off the bandwagon. It just doesn't make sense to me. Ranked among the top 10 running backs in PFF receiving grade last year, was efficient in the opportunities that he had. And I think Eric Bieniemy, nothing but good things for this offense. Even if he is working them a little bit too hard, that's okay. My hope is that it's going to pay off for fantasy. And Antonio Gibson, I think, could be a huge value, especially in full PPR leagues, if they continue to utilize him as a receiver, which is what I project for them moving forward through this 2023 season. Terry McLaurin, if he's not at 100% or misses any time, I think Gibson especially could be a huge beneficiary to that, in addition to Dotson.
Yeah, I think my two favorites like in this round are Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson. And we've talked about them before in other draft strategy episodes, and maybe I'm too high on the Washington offense as well. But I'm with you. I'm a believer in Sam Howell and Eric Bieniemy to make get this train running and going full steam. So I want in on that when possible. I have both guys like ranked right next to each other. So whichever one is available, I'm happy to take. But yeah, Gibson, I mean, he has two top 15 RB finishes in PPR. And it didn't get there last year, but two of the past 3 years at least has been a top 15 running back in PPR leagues. So I think he can get back to that range this year with Eric Bieniemy driving the offense. But how about you, Nate? Anything over here in round 9 that you like, or are you also in on the Washington backfield?
I'm not quite as in on the Washington backfield just because I like to think of scenarios where someone could get to the top 10, and I think it would take an injury to one of the Washington backs in order for one of them to be able to play that well, just because I think we will see pretty even playing time between the two with very clear roles with them. And I don't see Gibson overtaking Robinson for early down snaps this season. I don't think Robinson will start to take any passing down snaps from Gibson. So I think it should stay pretty close to 50-50, where there are a number of other backfields where, like, we have Jamal Williams in this range. We know Williams will be a starter for the first 3 weeks, and then there's a chance that Williams could be the early down back. He has a history of catching passes back to his days in Green Bay, so he's capable of being an every down player, just depending on how things are going with Kamara throughout the season. Or Jamal Williams might not end up doing that well, which in that case, I can cut him and find a different running back. But Michael Thomas is the one player in this range that intrigues me the most, just because he has that history of being the overall number one running back. I know things haven't gone as well for the past 3 years now, but he's still at an age where things can turn around. He has been playing in the preseason 100% of snaps with the starters in normal personnel settings. So he should see the playing time. And looking at what he's done well throughout his career, crossing routes, slant routes, those are things that Derek Carr has done really well, throwing to crossing route and slant routes throughout his career. And then the other routes he hasn't been quite as good, which are the routes that Chris Olave runs. So slightly concerning for Olave, but I think that at least intrigues me in this round. I think it's also worth mentioning this is the point of the draft where we start to see ADP split even more from one place to another, and I'm much more okay focusing more on rankings over ADP, and I'm okay drafting someone even if I have them a round or two ahead of where they should be getting drafted. And then I think the only other note that I'll make is I don't think there were any tight ends in this round, and we haven't really talked about tight end in the last 3 or 4 rounds now. So that kind of goes back to what we were saying in round 5 or so, that you really should be trying to target a tight end in one of those rounds, because if you don't get one, then you're going to be waiting a long time to get one.
Yeah, for sure. And we've talked about this too, Kate, right? Like this is kind of the year of like the sleeper tight end, right? Like there's these later round guys that we've liked to target. So there's going to be a dead zone here for tight end, and then we're going to come back to it with maybe a couple different options later on in drafts as well. But yeah, I'm with you. I think Michael Thomas is really interesting. He's been one of those guys too. We've kind of seen the ADP like just small little increments kind of creep up a little bit as the offseason's gone on, just as he's gotten closer to week 1 and hasn't suffered any kind of injuries or anything like that. So that's been nice to see, and hopefully he does stay healthy, because I'm with you. I think he could be a very nice value this year and potentially give you some wide receiver 2 production at worst, as long as he's in the lineup every week. All right, let's do one more formal round here, and that is round 10, where we're looking at Treylon Burks, Zay Flowers, Zach Charbonnet, the Dallas Cowboys defense and special teams, Samaje Perine, Kadarius Toney, Anthony Richardson, Daniel Jones, Dalton Schultz, the New York Jets defense and special teams, Geno Smith, and Quentin Johnston. Nate, when you're getting to round 10 here, you mentioned potentially moving away from, trusting the ADP and trusting your rankings more than anything. So anybody here that stands out to you that you have ranked significantly higher than the rest?
I think Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones are the two here that stand out to me. Just in terms of quarterbacks, I think there's a pretty clear top 8 players, and then from 9 to about 16 or so, you can rank them in any order. and you could probably be okay with it. I think I have Richardson and Jones near the top of that list. I think I might have them 9th and 10th at quarterback at this point. So if I didn't end up getting one of those top 8 quarterbacks, then I'm probably waiting all the way until this point. Even avoiding guys like Dak Prescott and Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins, who are going a little bit earlier. Typically, I'd rather wait to get Jones or Richardson, even Geno Smith in this range as well, someone who played very well last year in terms of fantasy production. I know it was more early in the year and he didn't do quite as well later in the year, but then they spent the first 2 rounds adding more skill players for him. Plus, he has basically everyone else in the offense back as well. So all 3 of those quarterbacks are people that I'd be comfortable either drafting to be a starter if I ended up not getting anyone in those first couple rounds, or if I'm looking for a backup quarterback, I'm probably jumping on a backup quarterback here rather than waiting for one of the other quarterbacks.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. Kate, how about you? There's a few quarterbacks in this range. Do you like any of these guys, or is there somewhere else that you'd rather go in this 10th round?
I really like Daniel Jones in particular here. Of course, Anthony Richardson, a lot of upside there. But, I think if we see, the projected jump in terms of Daniel Jones's value, like he legitimately has like top 6 QB upside, I think this season. The run game, obviously is much stronger with Anthony Richardson, but I do think that Daniel Jones projects as the much safer passer. And that could be sort of a differentiating factor with him, especially to stack with my Darren Waller shares. I think in general, the other guy that I'm kind of eyeing is Zach Charbonnet, who, right now got to play behind Kenneth Walker, but that 2nd round draft capital. Walker missed a lot of time in training camp with that groin issue, missed, the bulk of team practices. Like I think Kenneth Walker, for as much home run hitting ability as he has, I think, Zach Charbonnet has a very like tough skill set that's going to be, I think, conducive to some work inside the 5 as a goal line back. I think the scoring potential for this offense is off the chains. And like, let's say this groin issue lingers a little bit with Kenneth Walker, if he's not necessarily 100%. I think these reps that Charbonnet got to see in his absence are pretty key. And I think he could be a nice late round value. It's kind of hard in this range to find running backs with, potential to get in the mix. I think, without an injury to the starter, but I do think Charbonnet kind of projects as one of those guys that can see work, even if, let's say Kenneth Walker's healthy. I think he could still be in that conversation for the Seattle Seahawks offense.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like Charbonnet. I think you're right. I think there's potential there for his role to kind of even grow as the season goes on, even if they're both healthy, right? And we know Kenneth Walker doesn't project really as like a receiving back in any kind of way. Charbonnet does have a little bit more of that to his game than Walker, so there's potential there for him to kind of earn that late down or passing down role as well in the offense, which should lead to more fantasy points as well. So I like taking the shot on Charbonnet here. Anthony Richardson, he's the other one. Daniel Jones as well. Look, Daniel Jones ran for over 700 rushing yards last year, which is super impressive. And he's right there beside Anthony Richardson in rankings for me as well. I like to pair either one of these guys with like a safer bet at QB1 a lot of the times because there can be considered bigger swings. Richardson especially, I think the upside is just massive for Richardson. So I absolutely want in on him, even if I don't start him for the first few weeks of the year, to kind of see what he is first. And if he reaches that potential like we think he could, then that's another one of those potentially winning lottery tickets that we got super cheap here in round 10. So other than, defense, special teams, the only other like avoid for me is probably Dalton Schultz. We talked about him earlier this week, and I've moved him way down my ranks because I think there's a good chance he isn't getting like relevant usage there in what could be a struggling offense with like sneakily better wide receiver options as well, who should take targets away from him as well. I just want no part of Dalton Schultz in 2023. So he's been a big avoid in that round for me for sure. All right. So that we'll call that the end of like the round by round part. So basically now it's kind of like a free for all. We're getting into the double digit rounds here. So we'll kind of go through like our favorite sleepers. 2, 3, even just one, somebody that you want to talk about here in the final rounds of drafts that you absolutely will target, regardless of ADP. Kate, I'll start with you first. Who is like one of your favorite sleepers or multiple sleepers here in the later rounds?
I'm literally about to mute myself here because I can't stop talking about this guy. It's Jake Ferguson, tight end for the Dallas Cowboys. Dak Prescott, very willing to involve the tight end, obviously, in the passing game. Great things, I think, coming out of Cowboys camp. Love to see his usage. Had 3 targets, in the starting drive with the starting offense under Dak Prescott here in the preseason. Being drafted right now as the tight end 26. I think there's a lot of upside based on the scoring potential of this offense. As long as Dak Prescott is healthy, I love that, there's a lot of opportunity here, obviously, with the departure of Dalton Schultz. And one other guy I'm going to mention who, again, not a sexy pick whatsoever, but I find myself continuing to draft him like later on in fantasy drafts is Adam Thielen, who has, by all accounts, projected as a much more heavily involved receiver, I think, than I had slated. DJ Chark dealing with a hamstring injury. Thielen's been drafted on average as wide receiver 53. I think like I would, bet I don't know what I'm going to bet on, but like I'm going to bet very heavily that Adam Thielen smashes that over, especially in full PPR formats, just based on the potential for a significant target volume. Bryce Young went to him pretty early and often throughout that preseason, and that alone has had me bumping him up the ranks. Even if he is an old guy, I think he could have some value here in fantasy leagues, especially like in the later round drafts, in the later rounds of your drafts where everybody's a dart throw. At least, Adam Thielen, I think, projects as the team's wide receiver 1 right now.
Nice. I love it. Nate, how about you? Favorite sleepers in these double digit rounds?
Yeah, so it might be because I just rewrote my wide receiver sleeper article right before we started this, but I will go with Jayden Reed of the Packers. He's consistently been their slot receiver throughout the preseason. Green Bay has traditionally had a number of players kind of rotate in and out in the slot. They've moved wide receivers around a bit. I know Randall Cobb traditionally had been a slot receiver, but that didn't always mean that he was on the field. Devontae Adams had been excellent in the slot when he was there. Alan Lazard, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, all guys who performed better in the slot than out wide at times. But Reed has consistently been that slot player. And Green Bay has just given so much production to wide receivers in the slot. They're in the top couple of teams since they changed coaches to Matt LaFleur among production for slot receivers and among the bottom half of the teams in the league in terms of outside receivers, which is pretty notable considering how much the Packers were throwing the ball. So I think since they've been comfortable leaving Reed there and not moving him around or not moving other wide receivers into the slot, that could mean a lot of production for him this year. They spent a 2nd-round pick on him, which is just as much or more than any of the other receivers they have in Green Bay right now. And with the new quarterback and it being a lot of players that have either only been on the team for 1 year or it's their rookie year, we could really see a lot of changes in terms of who's getting the targets, who's not getting the targets. So I think Reed's in a good position to be a focal point of the offense based on how the offense has run in the past and where he's lining up.
I like it. I also have a Green Bay Packer on my sleeper list. So I like Jayden Reed, but I like this guy a little bit more. Kate, I can't remember what was the t-shirt again. It was big hands, big frame, big plays, something like that.
Yep.
Yeah, we got to get the t-shirt made. But Luke Musgrave, the tight end there in Green Bay, he's the other guy. I just love the talent here. I think the receiving upside for a Luke Musgrave, like if you're looking for kind of a late round tight end, somebody that has that top 10 potential, that, if you've punted the position and you end up with maybe like a David Njoku or Evan Ingram or Pat Freiermuth, getting somebody that with a little bit more upside, like a Luke Musgrave, I think is one of my favorite targets in the later rounds here. Just projects to potentially be an every down player here in Green Bay. And I think he has the receiving profile to do some damage here as a rookie. So I know it's a lot to bet on a rookie tight end. But again, we're taking shots here in the later rounds. So that's the one that kind of stands out to me. Other than that, yeah, we touched on him a little bit, but Sam Howell is the other one. Like if I want a QB2 and don't want to spend a pick in the earlier rounds on a quarterback, I'm just going to keep waiting until I feel like the time is right to grab Sam Howell. I end up with him a lot in super flex leagues as well, because I'm able to get him as like my QB3. I think he has the potential with this offense, with all the receiving weapons there, with Eric Bieniemy running the team as well. And with the rushing upside, right? We've seen him utilize his scrambling ability. We've seen him be a designed runner as well. I think it's all there for Sam Howell to potentially be that true late round quarterback this year, and win some fantasy leagues as a deep option. So lots of guys I like. I mean, even like Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Tank Bigsby, couple tanks. It's just a cool name, but but yeah, how anybody else for you guys, or do you want to move on?
The one guy that I'll mention that's not so much a sleeper, but someone I think is good to pair with the tight ends that you were talking about. I think Tyler Higbee, if you're just punting on tight end altogether and are trying to get one of these high upside players, I think Higbee is a great player to pair with one of them, just because Higbee is going to be the second best option in Los Angeles. At the very start of this, we were talking about how Matthew Stafford doesn't trust anyone outside of Cooper Kupp. Higbee is the second guy that he trusts, and we know exactly what he can be and what he's not going to be. He's probably not going to be a top 5 tight end, but he's probably going to be among the top 10 in fantasy points, even though he's not the most fun player to pick, just because he's just been decently good year after year after year, but he should continue to be decently good. So you can pair him with one of these rookie tight ends or young tight ends who you're not sure if they're going to work out at the beginning of the year. So you can start Higbee, and then once the tight end finally does break out, then you can starting the other tight end and put Higbee to your bench or on the waiver wire if the tight end's breaking out in a big way.
Yeah, I like it. Higbee's a great call. Even like Sam Laporta, just to come back to the rookie tight ends as well. Another guy, Kenneth Gainwell, we talked about him. Okay, we got lots of sleepers. I think we've all written them up. Like, they're all like coming to my head now as we talk about sleepers. But we've all written up sleepers.
Like in terms of value this year. I'm just saying.
Yeah, there definitely is. There's plenty of guys. I mean, even you're looking at the Tyler Algiers, Elijah Moore, Jalen Warrens of the world. There's a lot of those guys that could potentially emerge this year. So definitely check out the sleeper articles on pff.com for more of those. But that's going to do it for our 2023 season preview, guys. This was a lot of fun. Hopefully we got people ready for their fantasy drafts, and ready for the 2023 season, because we're going to keep going into week 1 and into the regular season as well, continuing to help out as much as we can. Speaking of drafts, this is going to be a fun one, because Nate and I have been doing like our little 5-round random battle drafts at the end of each episode. And now for the first time, we get to make this a triple threat match as Kate joins the fold. We are going to be drafting the best TV comedy series of all time. Kate, you're going to get the first overall pick. I'll be picking second since Nate won the last one. And Nate gets the third pick after beating me in that MCU movie draft. So Kate, you're on the clock. What is your 101 TV comedy series?
It's too easy, you guys. It's The Office, is it not? I don't know what everybody's taste, and that was something we mentioned before the show, before we hit record here, was that this could be a very volatile like draft, because you never know what somebody's style of comedy is. But for me, it's dry, it's sharp, and there's no show in the world that I think does a better job of the shy or the dry, like sheer uncomfortableness that The Office does. And I think they do such a good job with cringeworthy moments. Like, I am in my element when I'm watching The Office, and it's the clear 101.
Yeah, I had a feeling you were going to take The Office. I didn't think I'd be able to get The Office at 102. I think that's, pretty solid pick there, obviously, to start the draft. And yeah, I'm with you. It is an amazing show. Very, very funny.
Let's just pack it up now, because I I won already.
I know you're gonna get a ton of votes for that, but that's why we go 5 rounds, because hopefully you'll misstep along the way, and maybe we could recoup some value here. But I went with, for my first pick, I'm going with Seinfeld. It's a tried and true classic to me. It stands the test of time that it is still one of the funniest shows, most rewatchable series, in my opinion, of all time. So Seinfeld continues to be like, anytime it's on and I'm flipping through channels or whatever, I will put on Seinfeld and still laugh at things that I've seen over 100 times by now. So Seinfeld comes in as my 101. Nate, who you got?
So I get to pick 2 people here since we're doing this a little different than how we typically do. So I think I'm just gonna go with both of them together since they kind of contrast each other a little bit. I'll go with Arrested Development and Parks and Recreation. I think both of them stand the test of time in terms of their humor so far, and just so many enjoyable characters in both of those shows and I think the humor is a little bit different in both of them. So I think having a little bit of variety also helps there, but they will be my first and second pick.
Yeah, that is the downside of you picking back to back, because I had Arrested Development and Parks and Rec on my list here. So that is a major bummer for me. But okay, so this is I already know I'm going to start losing people, because my taste in comedy is probably a little different. But Always Sunny in Philadelphia, to me, deserves to be among the best comedy series of all time. I would be lying if I said it's not one. It's not maybe my favorite of all time, even though I didn't pick it 101. I just consistently put that series on when I'm working in the background, and it just runs over and over again. So Always Sunny is going to come in at number 2 for me. Kate, you get back-to-back pick now.
Yes, I do, and I'm glad that you guys left some goodies on the board for me. Here with my first pick, I've got to go with Modern Family, who like this show just, I think, offers a little bit of something for everybody. It's family friendly enough, but like just wholesome vibes, and like so funny, makes me smile every single time, makes me laugh out loud, which is hard to do when I'm sitting in a room by myself watching TV. Love Modern Family. Another show that just warms my heart so much, and I don't think this is going to be a very popular pick necessarily, but Big Bang Theory, which is full of cheese, full of full of whatever, but you learn a little bit something, you get to nerd out a little bit, enjoy some of the more nerdy references. I love Sheldon Cooper so much as a human being, top 10 annoying but fantastic television character in my mind. I think it's hard to pass up Big Bang Theory at this point in the draft.
Nice. Yeah, you got some heavy hitters now at this point. So this is this is gonna be tough. I'm going maybe off the beaten path again. Curb Your Enthusiasm. I have Seinfeld. I got to add Curb Your Enthusiasm to the list, because to me, it's just as good as Seinfeld, if not better, because I mean, Larry David to me is one of the funniest people on the planet. So the fact that he can still make me laugh with, again, rewatchability over and over and over again, he has to make the list for me. So Curb Your Enthusiasm will be my 3rd pick.
I think next I'm going to go with South Park for my next one, since we haven't had an animated series yet. And I think just its place in history and how they were so completely different than everything else at its time, and it's still going on now. But just their ability to make new shows, that they were doing it the week before the lead up of this show, so being able to stay topical for those reasons. And yeah, it's a lot of potty humor at times, but they're also pretty smart about how they do some of their characters and episodes a lot of the time as well. So I think they definitely stand out compared to a bunch of other comedies. And then I think I'm going to have to go with Community for the next one. I feel like there's a lot of shows that I'm going to be sad that I don't get to pick, but I feel like that's probably the one that I would have been saddest had that not slid into the end. So I'm going to stick with Community, and looking forward to them finally finishing their 6 seasons in a movie.
Yeah, that's right. They're working on the movie. God, you literally took another 2 off my list here.
That's my entire strategy for the past 2 weeks now.
I know, it's really frustrating. All right. So I don't have that much left. So I've got 3 picks I made. You know what? I'm gonna stick with the animated comedy, and I'm going with
No.
Rick and Morty.
Okay.
I was gonna go with another one that's probably bigger, but I think that one has kind of lost as much of its quality in the later seasons. But I'm going with Rick and Morty. To me, not just a great comedy, but a legitimately great like sci-fi show that with the concepts that they come up with in that show. So Rick and Morty is another one that I could just watch over and over and over again.
My backup with back-to-back picks
You got back to
to
back
close out.
now.
These are
So,
my last picks,
yeah,
correct?
yeah, yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm gonna go with we're going what is this 3 animated in a row? I'm gonna go with Family Guy, which I think is like
Oh well.
the my favorite animated comedy show. Like you said, like all of these animated comedies, irreverent, etc. But I have this fondness for Family Guy, its quotability, its inappropriateness, its lack of Emmys for how long. Like I got to root for the underdog here. And then of course I'm going to circle back around with my final pick being one of my favorite shows of all time, which I know is not hasn't aged as well as some others, but Friends, you've always got to include it in the conversation for best comedy shows, even if it is sitcom-y, cringy. Like it's a classic. It's so funny. Like particularly in the early seasons, I not as big a fan of the later seasons. I've seen all of them 18 million times. I have a Friends tattoo, for crying out loud. Got that when I was 16. Like I've always loved the show. It always makes me laugh. But Phoebe Buffay is like a top 10 stupid character of all time, but it just makes me laugh every single time I watch the show.
Nice. Yeah. I was worried we were gonna leave Friends off the list here.
No,
Because I
you
wasn't
can't
gonna
leave
pick
Friends
it.
off the
Yeah.
list.
It was looking risky there for Friends. So yeah, I thought for sure we were gonna get yelled at from all the Friends fans, but nice pick there to get Friends in the loop. So you know what? I'm gonna go with a more popular one just to try to even out my my picks a little bit because I know I've gone off the path a bit.
You're
And I'm gonna go.
pandering.
I know I got to pander it just like slightly because it does help me get some votes at least. But I'm gonna put The Simpsons on here because just as a classic, at least the first 10 seasons, I wish I could like specify in our poll seasons 1 to 10 of The Simpsons, but I know Nate won't allow it. So I'm gonna put I'm gonna put The Simpsons on my list because I do think just for everything that they've accomplished as a comedy series and continue to go today, we'd be crazy to leave them off the list, I think.
There. If we were able to leave like the last season or 2 off the list, I might be going Scrubs here. I might be going How I Met Your Mother here.
Mm.
I think I'm going to go with The Good Place for my last pick. I think in
Love
terms of
that.
how it
Great
ended the first
sleeper.
season and then just how it ended the entire series, just like trying to think of how there's a number of ones still on my list and thinking, okay, how did they start? How did they finish? And I think The Good Place stands out both of those ways. And just, I know it wasn't as popular as some of the others on this list, but I think The Good Place is definitely one that people should watch if they haven't watched it yet.
Yeah, good call. And yeah, Good Place was good. I mean, it was only a few seasons, right? It was like 3 or 4 seasons or something like that. So it was like a short one, but yeah, it was funny all the way through. So nice pick. Yeah, we left a few off. I had like Brooklyn Nine-Nine on here. I had Veep, Julia Louis-Dreyfus Veep, because I think that's amazing. Yeah, there's I'm sure there's other ones that people will yell at us for, but yeah, that was that was good. So Kate, you have The Office, Modern Family, Big Bang Theory, Family Guy, and Friends. I have Seinfeld, Always Sunny, Curb Your Enthusiasm, Rick and Morty, and The Simpsons. Nate, you got Arrested Development, Parks and Rec, South Park, Community, and The Good Place. So we'll put the poll together. We'll put it on Twitter. It's going to be interesting. I'll leave it up for a few days. Give people a good long time to think about why Seinfeld is the greatest comedy of all time, and then they can vote for me, hopefully. All right, that is going to do it for another episode of the PFF Fantasy Podcast, our biggest episode yet. So we hope that helps you get ready again for the 2023 season and for this final draft weekend of the year. If you want more, we also have a ton of content, articles, rankings, you name it, up on pff.com right now. So be sure to check out all that good stuff. Kate, what can the good people expect to find from you on pff.com this week?
I've been going totally cuckoo crazy here. Been putting out an article every day here, which usually I just pop in once a week. So excited to be in the mix right ahead of fantasy drafts. But one player to avoid in each round. I updated my dynasty draft rankings. ADP risers, fallers, like you name it. It's coming at you, including a special mailbag episode, which you all may have submitted your questions for on Twitter or our various social media channels. So be sure to tune into that, see if your question was answered. We got a few goodies that I think are going to be really insightful ahead of fantasy drafts.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely check out all of that as well. Nate, I can't remember. Did you post any articles this week? Just a few, I'm sure. What do you have up on pff.com?
Yeah. Basically, I've gone through all of my content from the past 2 months and make sure it's all up to date so it's ready for your fantasy drafts this weekend. So quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends, I have updated rankings, strategies, sleepers, breakouts on league winners, updated PPR rankings, half PPR, standard, superflex will be going up tomorrow. Draft strategy articles, 12 team, 10 team went up today, 14 team will be going up tomorrow. Saturday we'll have 12 team by pick number, so 1 through 3, 4 through 6, 7 through 9, 10 through 12. Article for if you only have 10 minutes until your draft is about to start, which if you just sat through this hour and 40 minutes with us, I'm guessing you're going to be more prepared than someone who has 10 minutes before their draft. So hopefully you don't need that article. On Monday, also compiled 500 stats to know before the season, compiling a bunch of stats from all of these articles. And then early next week, bold predictions. My favorite guys that I haven't had enough time to talk about so far this year. And then just more updates to draft strategy and rankings, making sure all of this news around all of the players who have been cut and added and all the injury information that we'll get now that we're closer to week 1 are all applied for the rankings. So you are ready to draft.
Beautiful. Love it. All right. As for me, I've updated all my rankings and tiers articles as well. Quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, linebackers, defensive linemen, defensive backs for those people that play in IDP leagues as well. I wrote up some new Superflex draft strategy articles for this week as well that go kind of round by round, like Nate was mentioning, based on which draft range you're picking from. So 1 to 3, 4 to 6, 7 to 9 are all up through Thursday, and then 10 to 12 will be up on Friday morning, as well as an updated version of my offense and IDP draft strategy article, which includes all the rankings and strategy and everything through there as well. So be sure to check out that. For anyone that hasn't already, we'd greatly appreciate anyone who's able to subscribe to the PFF Fantasy YouTube channel and the PFF Fantasy Discord. For those of you that do have drafts coming up, don't forget we do have the Fantasy Mock Draft Simulator on pff.com, as well as the live draft assistance to help you through ESPN, Sleeper, and Yahoo leagues. You can sync those up to your leagues, and you'll get pick by pick help and strategy along the way. So definitely check that out too. Nate, Kate, thank you both so much for doing this. This was a really fun episode. I'm excited for people to check it out. And mostly, thank you all for listening. We appreciate you all. We will be back on Monday talking what else? More fantasy football. So until then, peace out.